Crude by rail has to be among the most significant and fastest boom and bust cycles in railroad history, though the bust is not fully complete yet, should it ever truly disappear. In 2012, the railroad industry was getting really excited about crude oil trains. That summer, I took a railfanning trip to Ohio and kept a keen eye out for crude oil trains, but never saw one. The summer of 2013, I took a trip to Norfolk Southern's Pittsburgh line in Pennsylvania, and in 2014, a trip to Chicago. And on both trips, you couldn't throw a rock and not hit a crude oil train. They were everywhere. The boom was fast and dramatic. This video doesn't get into the economics and politics related to CBR, but instead looks at it from a railfan perspective. It'll showcase just some of the CBR trains I saw during my Pennsylvania and Chicago trips, including this race at Cassandra, Pennsylvania, between a loaded crude oil train and Amtrak Train 42, the Pennsylvanian, which runs from Pittsburgh to New York City. CBR trains from North Dakota's Bakken region originate on Canadian Pacific and BNSF. Many of those trains end up going to CSX and Norfolk Southern destinations. As a result, run-through power became the norm, and a tremendous amount of intermingling of power between railroads resulted in some mixed-up locomotive consists. Such is the case with this CP and NS consist powering an empty CSX oil train, K059, as it bangs across the IHB at Calumet Tower, Indiana. Here, BNSF and CSX locomotives combined to power a loaded crude oil train on BNSF rails in LaGrange, Illinois. The ex-BN SD60M on the point, reactivated from storage, illustrates how short of power the railroads had become during this time, a situation largely attributed to crude by rail. Empty CSX train K055 has nothing but NS power on it as it passes through Gary, Indiana. At the same location, but on Norfolk Southern rails, NS, UP, and CP locomotives combined to power empty oil train 65W from Westville, New Jersey, back to the Bakken via BNSF in Chicago. Once again, for a while you couldn't throw a rock and not hit an oil train. During a rail fanning day in West Chicago, Illinois, I didn't expect to see any oil trains, but for some reason, a Canadian Pacific oil train jumped onto the CN at Spalding and headed south on CN's Lathan subdivision, seen here passing by the still active JB Tower as it bangs across the Union Pacific Geneva subdivision. Norfolk Southern's heritage locomotives came about at roughly the same time CBR was taking off, and they were quite common on oil trains. I caught quite a few of them, so let's take a look, starting with the Virginian trailing on an empty oil train 65R in Crescent, Pennsylvania. At CP 502 in East Chicago, Indiana, along Norfolk Southern Chicago line, the Penn Central Heritage locomotive leads empty oil train 65R as it passes manifest train 31K, branching off onto the IHB main line. Both of these trains run through to BNSF. In Western Springs, Illinois, along the BNSF Chicago subdivision, I managed to catch 2 heritage locomotives at night on empty oil trains. The first was the Erie, seen here, and next is the Southern. Returning to Crescent, Pennsylvania for one last heritage consist, we see the Monongahela and Lackawanna heritage locomotives teaming up on loaded oil train 64R for Rybold, Delaware.
We'll get you a signal at YD after the 09 and 12, get east of our road behind the 64 road.
For a time, NS even had several oil train sets where they ran distributed power. Here is one such set slugging up the west slope of the Allegheny Mountains in Lilly, Pennsylvania. Lots of crude oil flowed through Chicago. BNSF Railway was the primary originator of Bakken crude, and it delivered trains to CSX, NS, CN, and even Canadian Pacific in the Chicago area. Here we see a load for Yorktown, Virginia in LaGrange, Illinois. This train is on BNSF rails, but in several miles it will be handed off to CSX. In Hinsdale, Illinois, we see a loaded BNSF oil train that will be delivered to Norfolk Southern, with a final destination of Westville, New Jersey. Even though Canadian Pacific is an originator of Bakken crude, it would still occasionally receive a train from BNSF in the Chicago area for Albany, New York. This is one of those trains, CP 608, passing through Dolton, Illinois on the IHB. In Hammond, Indiana, later that same day, empty CP oil train 609 is viewed en route from Albany, New York to the Bakken via BNSF. On another day, a CP 609 is viewed on NS trackage rights in Chesterton, Indiana. On Canadian National Rails in Wellsboro, Indiana, we see a loaded CN crude oil train from BNSF. This train is destined for a location in Quebec. We will conclude this video by observing an empty oil train from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, row west on the BNSF Chicago subdivision at Congress Park, Illinois, with run-through CSX power. This main line is nicknamed the Racetrack, and we see it earning that nickname as the oil train slowly overtakes an outbound Metro commuter train.
And for commuters, your attention please. Your attention please. The next outbound Metro train from Chicago now arriving.
Only the future will tell if crude by rail will continue to dwindle or make a resurgence. Either way, Its 2 or 3 year heyday made for quite an interesting splash on the railroad industry, and it was a great show for the railfan.